Welcome to Transcultural Communications, Chapter 5, Stumbling Blocks. Communication between healthcare providers and patients from different cultures is often complicated by different values, beliefs, traditions, expectations, and languages. As you work with patients from multicultural backgrounds, you will find that these differences raise barriers to transcultural communication. This chapter discusses communication barriers in terms of their underlying dynamics and their impact on healthcare providers and patients. There are 8 important barriers to transcultural communication in the healthcare profession. The first barrier we will look at is lack of knowledge. The failure to understand cultural differences in values, behaviors, and communication styles is a common stumbling block for healthcare providers who work in the transcultural settings. Healthcare providers who are not knowledgeable about cultural differences risk misinterpreting patients' attempts to communicate. As a result, patients may not receive the proper care. The second communication barrier or stumbling block is fear and distrust. Fear, distrust, dislike are emotions that all too often erupt when people from diverse cultures first meet. Rothenberg has identified 7 stages of adjustment that individuals pass through during their initial encounters with people of different cultures that they do not know or understand. These stages are as follows. Fear, where many people feel threatened when they don't understand something. For many people, different equals dangerous. Dislike, and these are people that do not like it when others communicate or act differently than the norm. Distrust, and these are people who are suspicious of other cultures' actions and motives because they don't understand a different culture's perspective. The next stage is acceptance. When 2 people from different cultures begin to share experiences in a positive way, they begin to accept one another. Then follows respect. People from different cultures begin to admire one another. Acceptance and admiration equal respect. And finally, they arrive at the stage of trust. When people from diverse cultures learn to depend upon one another, they develop trust. Like is a cooperation and concentration of the things that bind people together and allow people to like one another and not focus on their differences. The third barrier we will look at is racism. Racism in America, in American healthcare professionals, is a barrier that strangles transcultural communication between healthcare professionals and patients, and between healthcare professionals and other healthcare providers. Because healthcare professionals are supposed to be regarded as caring profession, people find it difficult to acknowledge that racism exists in the healthcare workplace. Indeed, for most Euro-American nurses, discussions of racism in American healthcare providing are taboo. According to Barbie, 1993 study, in his articles, he points out that there are 3 types of racism. The first one is individual racism, and this is discrimination because of visible biological characteristics, black skin or Asian eyes. Then there's cultural racism, where one group claims that cultural heritage is superior to another. This is when they persecuted the Jews because they saw them as an inferior race. Then there's institutional racism. Institutions manipulate or tolerate policies that unfairly restrict the opportunities of certain races, cultures, or groups. An example is segregated schools back in the 1950s and 60s. Whatever their cultural background, people have a tendency to be biased toward their own cultural values and to feel that their values are right and the values of others are wrong or not as good. Most people are biased toward their own culture and they believe that their values are right. This is called ethnocentrism. People who antagonize and alienate different cultures are ethnocentric. Simultaneous dual ethnocentrism is part of every interaction with a patient. Healthcare workers are assessing their patient and the patient is judging the healthcare worker. This happens especially when healthcare belief systems. To overcome your biases, you must first acknowledge that they exist. The fifth cultural barrier is stereotyping. Stereotyping are unsubstantiated assumptions that all people of certain cultures are alike. For instance, believing that all Irish people are drunks. Most stereotypes tend to be negative. Although many people in a culture may have similar characteristics, it is not the universal. Every person is an individual. Cultural blind spot syndrome is when a healthcare worker assumes there are no cultural or potential barriers to communication or care because they look and behave like you. In the same way, all white people are not the same. Not all Hispanic people are the same. Number 6 is ritualistic behavior. Healthcare workers tend to be systematic in their level of care, but they need to adjust their behavior to the culture that they are working with. For example, excluding family by the bedside during certain treatments may not be necessary. Unless there is a scientific or legal reason to conduct a ritual, consider being flexible. The 7th barrier is language barriers. Language provides the tools or words that allow people to express their thoughts and feelings. Language barriers present a grave threat to transcultural communication. There are several types of language barriers that impede communication in the United States. These barriers include foreign languages, different dialects and regionalisms. Dialect is a distinctive way a language is spoken or written in a given locality or by a group of individuals. A regionalism is a word, phrase, pronunciation, or custom particular to a given region. Idioms, slang, and street talk. Idioms are expressions, and every subculture has its own. The last and final communication barrier is number 8. Different perceptions and expectations. This is when the healthcare worker and the patient misinterpret each other's messages. The bigger the cultural, behavioral, and language difference between patients and healthcare professionals or healthcare personnel, the greater the probability that patients will misunderstand the treatment plan.